This morning's lectionary text is one that many of you will be familiar with, the Beatitudes. And it's aligned to a day of remembrance, as Nancy said, All Saints' Day, which falls on Wednesday, November 1st. In your mind's eye, I invite you to envision yourself up on the mountaintop as I read the scripture. I'll be reading from Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and he sat down, and then his disciples came to him, and he began to speak and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when your people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they are persecuted the prophets who were before you. Thanks be to God for this scripture, for us to gather more wisdom and understanding as we live and move and breathe on this earth. These 9 blessings invite us to stand at the threshold of God's kingdom, facing it as already and not yet in our world, our faith, our actions, and our relationships. Jesus is describing our relationship by reminding us of our journey of faithfulness. When he places us on that journey, he places us in the long line of those heroes who have gone on ahead of us. Remember the prophets who lived long before you and who were persecuted too. Now, this awareness of our companions on the way will remind us of the words that we hear regularly, rejoice and be glad in it. Reverend Palmer said that each of the sentences of the 9 blessings, each of the reminders, put us on the right road for discipleship. They call on us to make a decision about our lives. Some of the 9 have a haunting edge, like what does it mean to be poor in spirit? Would I not rather be rich in spirit? Nevertheless, Jesus describes our awareness of our poverty of spirit as a right road. Each one of the 9 blessings calls upon us to make a discovery, and each calls us not only to a change of attitude, but to concrete steps in our faithfulness. The second part of each blessing contains a promise. Peacemaking is hard and dangerous work, but what an honor to be called children of God. Hunger and thirst, especially for truth and the righteousness of God, may take us on an interesting pathway in our lives. That I am to mourn means that I am to weigh those around me with the weight they have as Christ's brothers and sisters, and to treat them with such honor that if they were to suffer or die, I would grieve. This is what Jesus calls the right road. We are to care that much. It's been said that many readers see parallels to Moses in Jesus' words of the Beatitudes, as he also went up on the mountain and he produced other authoritative texts. In Jesus' 40 days of temptation, the Transfiguration, and the Great Commission. Now here are a few additional echoes of the Old Testament. Isaiah promises comfort to the mourners. The psalmist speaks of the meek inheriting the land. The pure in heart will enjoy a privilege said to Moses and no one else in the Bible when they are able to see God. Unlike Moses, who is referred to as a lawgiver, Jesus is not about the law, but about its interpretation. The social context of the times is also heard in the Beatitudes. The blessing pronounced on the meek, for example, anticipates Jesus' characterization of himself as meek and lowly in heart, in contrast to the Pharisees. That mercy is a quality highly prized by Jesus is seen in his repeated references to Hosea, saying, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And the final verses were not intended as hypothetical, but as encouraging consolation for the community of disciples. Now, I read some Beatitudes for the 21st century, and they are coming from New Pilgrim's Church, and I now offer them to you. Blessed are the marginalized, for they are extravagantly welcome in the culture of God. Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." But if we think of heaven solely as some cosmic afterlife, aren't we telling those who are suffering to go on suffering, hoping for something better after they die? I don't think that's what Jesus proclaimed. I don't think when Jesus proclaimed the kingdom of God that he was talking about some otherworldly post-life experience. When he said the kingdom of heaven has come near, I think he was saying that the culture of God is all around us if we are willing to take part in making it happen. From the earliest descriptions of nomadic tribes of Israelites in the Hebrew scriptures, hospitality has been a hallmark of the culture of God in the desert. If you don't offer hospitality to people, they can die. Again and again, scriptures urges God's people to care for the orphan, the widow, and the stranger. Jesus made it his life's work to seek out and lift up the poor in spirit, those on the margins. In the UCC, we call it extravagant welcome. Like Nancy said earlier, no matter who you are, where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. So blessed are the marginalized, for they are extravagantly welcome in the culture of God. Blessed are those who care for the earth, for they promote a healthy, dynamic ecosystem that cares for all of us. The idea of heaven as otherworldly also does a disservice to God's creation. We are the stewards of creation. We ignore that responsibility at our own peril and the peril of every living thing on this earth. Thankfully, people of all faiths and many who don't follow a spiritual tradition are awakening to this peril, putting everything from their money to their lives on the line. Unfortunately, as we know, there are those who refuse to acknowledge the threat, making it imperative for those of us who do to step up. Those who care for the earth are truly blessed, and they are a blessing to all. Blessed are the bold, for they see the culture of God manifest before their eyes. Blessed are the meek, Jesus said, the humble, the gentle, for they will inherit the earth. Gentleness and humility are wonderful traits, and it's my prayer that those who display them will cease to be exploited by the boastful and belligerent, that they, the deserving, will inherit the earth. But doesn't that beg the question, what kind of shape will the earth be in by the time they inherit it? We need to gather in the hundreds of thousands who are passionate about peace, justice, equal regard, and equal rights for all. We need to make our voices heard every chance we get. We need to act boldly to create the change we want to see in the world. And in taking up this challenge, we will see the culture of God manifest in ways large and small before our very eyes. Blessed are the empathetic, for they heal the brokenness of the world. To heal the painful divisions of our world, to ensure that everyone has their basic needs met and mutual respect is the basis for all human relationships. We need to move beyond sympathy and compassion to empathy. We need to be willing not to judge, but to understand each other's condition from their perspective, to place ourselves in their shoes and feel what they are feeling. Empathy has been demonstrated to increase pro-social helping behaviors. There was an article written about a woman named Janet Jones Preston. She volunteers with the Black Prisoners Caucus, which is a group of inmates at the Monroe Correctional Complex who search for solutions to end what group leader Anthony Wright refers to as the preschool to prison pipeline. From serving as a family support person and supervisor in the public schools to taking in a 13-year-old girl who she now considers her daughter, to mortgaging her house to fund a school her son started in Ghana, Janet has spent her life working and volunteering to make children's lives better, to give them hope and a future. She says her own struggles have deepened her empathy for others, recalling the shame she felt when she became pregnant with her son at age 18. She said, I wanted to quit going to church because church people were just so mean. They'd ask me questions that they knew the answer to. And I was just a kid, she says. Refusing to consider that another person's situation is something that could happen to us, putting everyone who is different from us in the category of other, allows us to diminish and disregard them. On the other hand, author Jeremy Rifkin presents the concept of an empathic civilization through solidarity. If we saw fellow humans and creatures as an extension of ourselves, society might become more unified and see a reduction in war, bullying, crime, and violence. So blessed are the empathetic, for they heal the brokenness of the world. Blessed are those with integrity, for their hearts, minds, words, and actions are one. When we're in right relationship with God and one another, when right intention leads to right action, we are integrated. Our words and actions match our thoughts and feelings. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, this is a fleeting state of grace that I experience only occasionally. Most of the time, I'm conflicted. I lack the courage to take the action I think is right. I think things I would never say out loud, but these moments when my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions are aligned and feel sacred, holy, well, those words, the word for holy is derived from an old English word meaning whole, used to convey a sense of being sound, healthy, entire, and complete. I never feel more whole. I never feel more open to the divine presence than when I feel integrated in thought, feeling, word, and deed. Or as Jesus said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are those who commit themselves to peace, for they disarm violence. Violence is a commonly used tool of oppression and conquest. When people are oppressed and persecuted, when their homes and rights are taken away, they respond with anger. Righteous anger, justified anger, but anger that often leads to retaliatory violence. From the time of slavery in Egypt, God's people expected a warrior king, an anointed one who would avenge them and secure their freedom by any means necessary. No wonder they found Jesus puzzling. No wonder people were confused about whether he really was the promised Messiah, the anointed one sent by God to liberate them. Like other great leaders throughout history, Jesus understood that violence only begets more violence. He called peacemakers blessed, and only by committing to strategies of peace can we end violence. Blessed are those who organize, struggle, and sacrifice for freedom and equality, for they bend the moral arc of the universe towards justice. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is the one who said the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. He may have based those words on a sermon by Unitarian minister Theodore Parker, who in 1853 wrote, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but a little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. But from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice." End quote. Our eyes reach but a little way. We cannot see beyond the horizon to confirm beyond certainty that the arc is bending little by little towards justice. Sometimes our current trajectory seems like a path that will hurtle us past the point of no return. You've heard it said, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men should do nothing. That is why those who organize, struggle, and sacrifice for freedom and equality are blessed. If we want to live in a just world, we must all do our part. We must all throw our weight against the levers of power to bend the moral arc of the universe towards justice. And finally, to live fully into the culture of God we need to realize that we are all blessed. All of us are beloved children of the divine source as we express and understand it. Blessed are we in the amazing diversity of our ethnicity, age, ability, and orientation, for we make visible the glory of creation. For in the glory of creation, we just don't have a tree. We have a beech and aspen, and we have maple and walnut, oak and cedar, and too many others to name. And we don't have just bird. We have owls and finches and sparrows and orioles and wrens, and on and on and on. And we don't just have human. We have black, brown, white, blonde, gray, and red hair. We have green and blue and brown and gray and hazel eyes. We have skin colors from the palest peach to the darkest brown. We have a multitude of ways to love one another. What better way to show gratitude to the source of all life than to embrace and affirm all persons for their unique selves, to love all siblings as ourselves, and to look upon the endless variety of creation and declare what God has said, it is good. Despite the tragic news in Palestine and Israel, Acapulco, and Maine, Jesus reminds the disciples and us what it looks like to move in the world with the bias of the Beatitudes, the bias of God. He sat down with his disciples and the listening crowds nearby and taught them about the things to hold close on days like these. And Fleshed reminds us that the Beatitudes remind us what we know, but need to hear again and again for ourselves, for each other, for the aching planet, for those and those parts of all of us that have been distanced from God by complicity with evil. God's favor, God's closeness, God's justice, and God's presence, God's love, God's bias, they're all always working to restore rightful balance in the world. When we look around and can only see proof of empire's teaching, the Beatitudes remind us how to perceive differently and live differently and relate differently. And in doing so, we don't give up when crowds begin to gather with hunger and thirst for justice or to weep for all the world's pain. We come to recognize this is the kingdom drawing near, as signs of God's presence, as hope moving among us. Hope moving among us, blessed are the saints. We remember the saints this week and every day. Diana Butler Bass, she published a history of Christianity entitled A People's History of Saints of the Liberal and Progressive Tradition. People like Origen, Perpetua, Abelard and Heloise, Katharina Zell, Lazarus Spengler, Anne Askew, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Harry Emerson Fosdick, Maria Stuart, and Samuel Green. The stories told are about generosity and justice, about prophetic preaching and speaking truth to power. She claims that our history is important to both our spiritual lives and in enacting social justice. Well, if you grew up Catholic, Reverend John McCall says that you probably know your patron saint, and you may remember a few of the other more important saints for particular causes. Now, certain Catholic saints are associated with certain life situations, and these patron saints, he says, intercede to God for the devout believers who can take their special needs to them and know that they will listen to our prayers and pray to God with us. So accountants have St. Matthew, doctors have St. Luke, dancers have St. Vitus, the florists have St. Dorothy, and for those who have poor memory, I don't remember. St. Jude is the patron saint of lost causes, desperate situations, and the Chicago Police Department. And for some reason, grocers get 3, Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. Well, by the 8th century, the Pope had established November 1st to honor all the saints, known and unknown, and to make amends if any of the saints' feasts had not been sufficiently observed. The night before All Saints' Day was called All Hallows' Eve, or in the Old English, Halloween. In generations past, both children and adults would parade in costumes that represented the saints. Now, it was once a minor holiday, and today's Halloween has emerged as one of the top 6 for retailers with estimates this year that shoppers in the U.S. would spend nearly $5 billion on costumes and candy. Since the Reformation in the 16th century, Protestants shifted away from the Roman Catholic idea of saints as somehow super holy disciples who can intercede between us and God. So November 2nd is more our day. It's All Souls Day, more attentive to remembering all the commonplace, everyday saints who have touched our lives. The saints of God are people just like you and like me. We know how the love of God shines particularly through some people. And if each of us were to tell aloud about an everyday saint that we've known, do you suppose they'd have anything in common? There's a few things. For one, I'd guess that a true saint is the last one to recognize that she or he is a saint. The true saints among us are people of humility, who don't draw attention to themselves, but simply go about life, doing the right thing and easing each other's burdens. Think of Mother Teresa, who took on the burdens of the poorest in India. Think of a hospice care worker like Lavetta, or a patient therapist like Lance or Nancy, who can help others put their lives back together. Secondly, I think saints teach the faith by living it much more than by talking about it, the quiet deed of kindness, or just being there with someone. By being present to us in our times of questioning or anxious worry, everyday saints give us perspective and hope. Third, I think saints are those wise souls who keep the faith regardless of whatever life hands them. Everyday saints are persistent. In Matthew's version of the Beatitudes, he says, "The poor, the hungry, the sorrowful, and the persecuted can leap with joy because they will experience a great reward." When we encounter a truly godly person, we may never see the struggles that shape them, but we know that life's most important lessons don't come from times of comfort and ease, rather from times of challenge and disappointment. On this Remembrance of All Saints Day, we can thank God together, the everyday saints, and for each one who connects us to the larger life of the Spirit.